Okay, then we're ready to start Basics of Biblical Hebrew, chapter 34. Only two more lessons after today. We'll just start off with the Hebrew Insight, as usual. We'll go to the workbook, see if there's any questions, and we'll look at the translations. And then we'll start the Hitpael. Hitpael. Strong stem verbs and the vocabulary. So for the insight, God promised Abraham in Genesis 13, 16, 15, 5 and 6, 22, 17. And he promised Isaac and promised Jacob that he would bless them with many descendants. Everything seemed to be against this promise. Abraham's wife Sarah was barren. Isaac's wife Rebekah was barren. Jacob's wife Rachel was barren. While this looks like it would be cause to doubt God's promises, what we see is that God will accomplish what he said. We need to see this truth that God will do what he says and not what it may look like at any point in time. So Sarah did have a son in her old age. Rebekah had twin sons and Rachel had two sons. We studied the Hitpael stem, the causative stem, action, causative active action in chapters 26 and 27. And God's promise to Abraham in 17:6 is, I will cause you to be exceedingly fruitful. I will cause you to multiply exceedingly. God is the subject. It was up to him to cause it to be. God's promise to Isaac in Genesis 26:4, I will cause to multiply your seed as the stars of heaven. And then he promised Jacob that his seed would be like the dust of the earth. Then at the end of Genesis and also the beginning of Exodus, they were numbered as 70 souls. However, after the Exodus, before they entered into the land, Moses said in Deuteronomy 1:10, Yahweh your God caused to multiply you all. That's what he said he'd do. He would cause to do it. And so Yahweh your God caused to multiply you all. And behold, you all today are as the stars of the heaven for multitude. But there are some who say, did God really say? And does it sound familiar? A question, of course, that's what the devil said to Eve in the garden about the fruit. Did God really say? Did you die? There's some who say, did God really say? They claim that Israel could not have grown to the numbers given in the book of Numbers, and that the word for thousand, which is Aleph, doesn't only mean 1,000, but rather it can mean chiefs or clans or divisions, and that the census numbers are inflated. I wrote a paper entitled Numbers and Numbers, where I compared the Hebrew text. I gave a wooden English translation with the given numbers and totaled them. And the word Aleph has to be understood as 1,000, or the numbers simply do not work. So I have a screenshot of the document, a portion of the document. This isn't all of it. But you can see that it's got the reference. In the left column, it's got the tribes. It's got the Hebrew text with all the numbers. Then I give a word-for-word wooden translation in the next column. And then if Aleph means 1,000, then this 6 and 4,000, that's 46,000 and 500s. So we have the total here of 46,500. However, if Aleph means clan, then there's 40 and 6 clans, and then the census was actually 500s. See? And then same way, 50 and 9,000. Okay, well, that's 59,300 here, 300s. However, if Aleph is clans or something like that, then it'd be 59 and then 300 people. So you have 300 people with 59 clans, or 500 people and 46 clans. And so then I add them all up, and in the book of Numbers, it gives us the total 600,000 and 3,000s and 550. So this is the total that the book of Numbers gives us. However, this would say that there would be 603 clans, but that's not the number of clans. It's 598 when you add that up. And then the census would be 5,550. So basically just under 10 people per clan. But the total that's given equals the amount added together here if Aleph means 1,000. So Aleph does mean 1,000. And, I've even seen it in some dictionaries where it says, well, sometimes Aleph doesn't mean 1,000, but I don't believe it. And I believe the Aleph means 1,000. And this is true in the original census, there in chapter 1 of Numbers. There was a census later in Numbers. It works for that too. And also there was the way that they camp around the tabernacle and all the numbers there. All of these all work out the same way. If Aleph doesn't mean 1,000, it just simply does not work. It is clear that the numbers only total correctly if Aleph equals 1,000. The total given in the biblical account does not equal the number of clans and the census. And this is demonstrated to be true in the numberings of the people, both of them, how the way they camped, as well as the spoil of sheep and cattle and donkeys. They're all counted the same way. And I don't know how you would have a clan for a cattle or for a donkey or for sheep. But the numbers are exactly the same. It's consistent in the book of Numbers and other places too. And Aleph means 1,000. God who performed the miracles, brought the plagues on Egypt, parted the Red Sea, provided food and water in the wilderness, kept their clothes from wearing out, can certainly and did certainly fulfill his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God's word can be trusted. His promise can be trusted. He alone is able to cause these things to be, and that is why we read Hebrew. Okay, any questions on the workbook? This would be for chapter 33. This would be the Pual week verbs. And the translations begin on page 168. And so we have 9 translations, 9 scriptures there. Plus, because this is on the week verbs chapter, we actually have a Hebrew reading number 5 as well. So we'll go through those. Okay, so page 168, translation number 1 from Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. And he was finished, the heavens and the earth and all the host of them, or the host. And the first word, we see that we have a vav consecutive with that patak under it. And then it's an imperfect. We have the yod preformative, and it's got a shva. The first root letter is the kaf, and it has the kibbutz under it, and we have the dagesh and the lamed, and there you go. There's your classic pual format. And he was finished. That's why I said, and he was finished, because it's passive. Number 2, and the waters, they increased very, very. So they increased very much over the earth, or the land, and they were covered, all of the mountains, the high ones, which were under all the heavens. We had to supply a to be verb in there, which were under all of the heavens. So the third word from the end on the top line, we see that shva, we see the kibbutz, we see the dagesh. You draw a line through that. We did that on the screen. That's a pual. They were covered, passive. Number 3 from First Chronicles 21:16. And he lifted David. So here we have the good Hebrew word order. We have the verb and then the subject. So it's David. And he lifted David his eyes, and he saw the angel of Yahweh standing between the earth and between the heavens, and his sword being drawn out in his hand, being stretched out over Jerusalem, and he fell, David, so David fell, and the elders being covered in sacks or in sackcloths on their faces. Um, they fell on their faces. Really, the sackcloth wasn't on their faces. So on the second line, third word in, we have shulufa, and we see that U vowel, that shurik in there, and that's not a pual. We don't see that pattern in there with the shva, patak, and the dagesh in the second letter. This is actually a passive participle, a call passive participle. So that's not one of them. And then later on, 2 words later, we have netu, netuah, netuya. There you go, netuya. And that also, we have that U vowel in the middle, but that's a call passive. Um, so the translation like being stretched out, and the other one being drawn out. The first one being drawn out and then being stretched out. Those are called passive participles. So we go down to the third line, third word in. We have mechuksim, and you see the mem, it's a participle. It's got the shva. We have the kibbutz under the R1. We have the dagesh in the R2. Again, that's classic plural, being covered. They were being covered in sacks or in sackcloth. Notice the basakim. The ba there is in the, and then sakim. It kind of sock. When you think of that plural, sock or sakim, that's a kind of easy word for vocabulary for sackcloth. Sack. It's kind of sock. Anyway, number 4 from Ezekiel 24:18. And I spoke to the people in the morning, and she died, my wife, in the evening. And we don't have accent marks in here, but that's where the knock is. That's where the strong break is. So we'll pause, and then we'll pick up again and say, and I did in the morning, just as I was commanded. And the pual is the last word there. It's a perfect. We don't have a preformative, so there's no shva, but we still have the kibbutz under the R1. We have the dagesh in the R2. So that's a classic pual perfect. And the T ending is the first person singular subformative. So I was commanding. Number 5 from Psalm 113:2, and he will be the name of Yahweh, being blessed from now and until, or as far as forever. The 4th word in, mavorach. We see the mem on the front. Yes, that's a participle. So being blessed. But what happened? We've got that holum vowel there. Well, you remember we talked about it last week. A kibbutz, if it lengthens, when the vowel lengthens, it'll become a holum. Why would it lengthen? Because the second letter is a resh, and it's going to reject the dagesh. So you would have had a dagesh in the R2. It's rejected because it's a resh. And so the vowel the kibbutz is lengthened to a holum. And so that's our two guttural weak pual form. And then we have the same thing, first word on the next page, number 6, Judges 5:24. She is blessed from women, which is that mean preposition is going to be more than. It's a comparative mean. And so she is blessed more than women, Yael, the wife of Kever, the Kenite. And again, we have that men preposition, which you say from women again, but it's going to be more than women in the tent. She is blessed. And so actually the first word and the last word, they're the same. So we have the tav preformative, that's the third feminine singular. We see the shva under there. We expect a kibbutz, but we don't see a kibbutz. We see the R2 as a resh. The dagesh is rejected from resh. The kibbutz was lengthened to an O vowel, to the holum. And so we can still see that that is the classic two guttural method of, that's the compensatory lengthening. That's what I need to call it, compensatory lengthening. Number 7, from Leviticus 8:35, and the entrance of the tent of meeting, or the appointed time. That's to be the same, but we're accustomed in English to saying a tent of meeting. You all will dwell um, or sit by day and night 7 of days, and you all will keep, or you all will guard the responsibility or the duty, the thing kept. You can see shamar is in both of those words. You all will keep. You can see shamar there, and atem is the second masculine plural. Second masculine plural subformative there, and you all will keep. And then we have the responsibility, or the duty, or it's a thing kept. We still see shamar in there with the mem on the front and the top on the back, but mishmeret is a responsibility or duty. So let me start at the beginning of that line again. You all will keep the responsibility of Yahweh, and not you all will die, because thus I was commanded. And so we saw that earlier, one of the others, I was commanded. That was in number 4. The last word, we see the kibbutz under the tzadeh, and we've got the dagesh and the vav. That's the R2. And so that's a perfect. The T ending again is first person singular subformative. So I was commanded, not I commanded, but I was commanded. It's passive. Number 8, from Psalm 37:22, because the ones being blessed of him, they will possess the land. But the ones being cursed of him, they will be cut off. So the second word in, we see the mem prefix. Yes, that's a participle. And we see the shva under that. And again, we see the holum O vowel over the R1, because the R2 is a resh. It's going to reject the dagesh. We have compensatory lengthening, so it goes from a kibbutz to a holum. Number 9, taken from Psalm 96, 3-5. We start with an imperative, a PL. Notice the dagesh in the second letter. It's a PL. So it says, recount among the nations, or say in the nations, but probably fits better to say among the nations. So recount among the nations his glory. And if we had the accent marks, we'd see the atnach there for a pause. So we'll pause a little bit, and then we'll pick it up again and say, among all of the peoples, the ones being wonderful of him. So it'd be his wonders or his wondrous deeds. That's a nephal participle with the third masculine singular pronominal suffix. Next line, because great, and we'll have to supply a to be verb. It's a verbless clause for great is Yahweh, and being praised, very. And there we would have another break from the accent marks, the not for this verse. And then we pick it up, being feared, he over all gods. Next line, next verse, verse 5. Because all the gods of the people's worthlessness or vanity, and he's got in parentheses idols. Well, they're idols, but it's calling them worthlessness, calling them, or you could even say vain idols, and that would probably work okay. And Yahweh, heavens he made. All right, so looking for, on the second line, fourth word in, we have umachulal, and so we see we have the conjunction, or conjunction, then we have the mem, that's our indicator of the participle. We've got the schwa under it. We got the kibbutz under R1. We got the dagesh in R2. There's our classic pool. Okay, then going on to Hebrew Reading 5, page 170. This is all from Psalm 96, verses 1 through 5, which overlaps number 9. The last 3 verses are the same. So we have siru. We see we don't have a preformative, but we do have the subformative, the shuric subformative. So this is an imperative. So it's a command. Sing to Yahweh a song, a new one. Sing to Yahweh all the earth. Sing to Yahweh. Make blessed his name. To bring good news. That also is an imperative. To bring good news. That's also an imperative. From day to day, his salvation. Verse 3, recount. This is a PL imperative. Recount in the nations or among the nations his glory, the glory of him, among all the peoples, ones being wonderful of him, or his wondrous deeds. That's the Nephal. We saw that earlier. Oh yeah, well that's because we already had 3, 4, and 5. So we've already looked at these. We don't have to do them again because this is exactly the same as previous page, number 9 on the previous page. And again, we had on verse 4, the 4th word in, we see our participle with the schwa, the R1 has the kibbutz, and the R2 has the dagesh. So that's our pual. Any questions on the translations? Okay. Then we're ready to start. Hitpael. You may notice that the book has Hitpael, and that's because the book teaches the traditional pronunciations, and the tav that does not have a dagesh in it is the th sound, but in modern Hebrew pronunciations, it's whether the tav, whether it has a dagesh or if it doesn't have a dagesh, modern Hebrew still gives it just the T sound. The traditional would give the without the dagesh th and a T sound for the dagesh. But we don't do that for modern Hebrew pronunciations. So modern Hebrew, they wouldn't say Hitpael, they'll say Hitpael. And that's what we'll do. So learning objectives. To understand the meaning of the Hitpael stem, we want to be able to identify Hitpael strong verbs. And then we want to recognize metathesis. And we'll talk about that, metathesis. And I have some examples. But first of all, let's look at what does that mean when we refer to the Hitpael stem. This will be the last stem we study. Congratulations. Oh, I should put a little sound thing in there, applause. We're not done yet. So the last stem we'll study, but we're studying the 7 most common, and even some of these aren't very common. The Hitpael is not all that common, but there are variations. There's a number of stems that are variants, but they're one, they're rare. 2, they're variants, and so they're really not that hard to get used to. Once you look them up and you go, oh, okay, well, that's going to be like a PL, or that's going to be like a Hitpael. So the advanced information has more information on addition stems. So Hitpael, well, we see the heat, and we see heat, and we see and we see ale. Hitpael. This paal word, this means verb or work. What happens to that word is what we look for. Those are our diagnostics. And so we're looking for heat, and we're looking for air there, the patak and the zera. So Hitpael is our last one for the derived stems. You can see here we have heat, katail. So we have the heat, we have the ka, and we have tail. So you can see the diagnostics right there. With katal, he killed. So that would be he slaughtered himself, which really doesn't make any sense for the katal stem, but that's what it would mean if such a thing were possible. So the Hitpael is under the intensive column, and it's reflexive. Reflexive meaning that the subject is doing the action to themselves. We'll see some examples of that. It means some other things besides, but that's kind of the broad brush category of it. So Hitpael is the last one we have. Hitpael is the reflexive of Piel. So looking at Piel, we have Katal, he killed. Okay, and then we have the intensive, this would be the Piel, Kitail, he slaughtered. And so now we want to look at Hitpael. What happens with Hitpael? There is a Hitpael that I keep misspeaking it because there is such a one, but it's not one of the top 7, and it's just a variant on this. That's why I'm misspeaking on it instead of saying Hitpael. So it's intensive and it's reflexive, and so it comes out heat katail, which means he slaughtered himself. But we see the heat. Notice also we have the shva, the patak, and the dagesh. That line there. Notice that that's the same. We'll talk more about that too. So he slaughtered himself doesn't really make much sense. So let's look at a different verb. We have shavar. Shavar means he broke. So that's the call. And then for the intensive, this would be the PL, shiber. He shattered. So we can see that that's intensified it. But for the Hitpael, which is intensive reflexive, it's going to come out heat shaber. There's the heat. There's the sha, bear, heat, ha, ale. So we see all the components there. And so intensive reflexive, it shattered itself. Well, that's a little bit better than slaughtering oneself as far as something that makes sense. So as we have been doing, let's go to the summary first. It's on page 369. 369. And the summary starts on the previous page, but the chart is at the top of the page. But if you look, let's start with the perfect column. And you look down through there, you see the very top, you have the diagnostic, heat, and you just look at all the way through, heat, all the way through. No surprises. And we see the dagesh in the tet, and just go down through there, and you see the dagesh in the tet all the way through, no surprises. Okay? For the imperfects, well, now we have preformatives. So we have heat for the perfect, that's the Hitpael form. But when you have a preformative, notice the yod preformative, and then we have tav preformatives, aleph preformative, and a nun preformative. We have the preformative. We still have that heuric vowel, just like we have heat katail in the perfect. We have yeet katail. The heuric yod goes under the preformative. We still get the tav, and so we have that still have that pattern all the way through. The only place it changes is on the aleph on the first person singular, because it's a guttural. And all the rest of the way through, we have that heuric, we have the tav, that extra tav that's stuck in there before it's a prefix, it's stuck before the root. And again, we have the dagesh all the way down. And then when we get to the imperatives, the infinitives, and the infinitive construct, and the infinitive absolute, nothing changes with the diagnostic. It's exactly the same. And also notice that it's got that like the perfect, the imperative, the infinitive construct, the infinitive absolute, all of them. You see that. Shva, the patak, and the dagesh in the R2 all the way across. And then for participle, again, we have that mem prefix, and it gets that heuric vowel, and the tav of heat is still there all the way through, and the dagesh in the tet is there all the way through, and all the way through you see that shva, patak, dagesh pattern that we've been looking at um, in the other intensive forms. So when you get the overview here, you can see that really there isn't a whole lot to learn. It's always there are some tricky things we'll look at, um, but the big picture, looking at the big picture, um, it's a pretty simple concept to get. So the meaning of the Hitpael stem. They can be reflexive. We talked about that. That's kind of the main category we put it under. So we have heat kadesh, heat kadesh. We have the heat. We have the and the a, heat paleo, or heat pael rather, heat pael. But that's what happened to kodesh, the kadash, which is to be holy. And so that means he sanctified himself. He made himself holy because it's reflexive. It's like, you have the subject and the action. He's acting against himself. And so he made himself holy, or he sanctified himself. And you're going to see that, when the priests are consecrating themselves for temple service or something like that. So that's the reflexive use of the Hitpael. And then there's a reciprocal use. And that's reciprocal is going to be like you have one party over here and one party over here, and they're going to be working with each other, as it were. So you still have that. This is, as I said, up here on the first one with reflexive, you have the subject acting on himself. You still have that action, that circular kind of action going on here. And so we have heat, kasharu, heat kasharu. They conspired together. And so you have two parties and they're working together. So that's another use of the Hitpael. And then there's iterative. For instance, heat halake. Heat halake, well, it's Hitpael. We have the heat, we have the we have the a right there. So we know that's what it is, but he walked himself. It's like, the dog takes the leash and puts it in his mouth and goes walks himself. No, that's not what it means. It means iterative. It's not used like that. It's used for iterative, which means he walked back and forth. And then the last one is simple action, where it doesn't seem to be intensified and it doesn't seem to be reflexive in any way. And so we have heat paleo. Heat paleo is he prayed. If we don't see this roundabout. Of course, you could kind of liken that word to the reciprocal here, because you'd have, here's me and here's God. Of course, that's going to be way bigger. I can't put him on the screen, but there's still this back and forth here going on in praying. But that's not really what this is saying. It's just when you come to heat paleo, I'm sorry. It's just he prayed. You're just going to translate it as simple action. So those are the four main ways that Hitpaels are used. So that's what it means. Now, how do we identify it? Well, if we've gone over that, this is going to be a review because we've already seen it. The thing we want to remember, the thing we want to get the big picture. We want to relate it. One of the ways to remember things is to relate it to something you already know. And we have the intensive column here. And in the intensive column, we have some characteristics, and that carries over not only in the PL and PUAL, but also in the Hitpael. So here we have Kitail, that would be the PL, which would be slaughtered. And then we have Kutal, which is the PUAL. He was slaughtered. And now we're looking at the Heat Katail. He Hitpael, Hitpael, which means he slaughtered himself. And notice the things that are similar. What do they have in common? They all have this dagesh in the R2. And of course, we're looking at perfect here, so there's no preformative. If we had a preformative, we'd see a schwa there, right? And this would be a patak. So we're just looking at perfects right now. And so but the perfect of the Hitpael, you still have this schwa, patak, dagesh pattern that you get in these other stems when they move to like imperfect or imperative or the infinitives, that sort of thing. So one of the things we look for is that dagesh in the second root. So PL and Hitpael stems. This is looking at like the second is the preformative with a second masculine singular. So you, okay, well, first of all, so we have the top preformative. So this is going to be second masculine singular. We have the schwa, we have the patak, we have the dagesh. So we draw that line across there, and we can see that this is going to be a PL, which it says here, PL. And then we have heat to tail here, and we see the same pattern. So what do they have in common? No, there they are, schwa, patak, dagesh. And there's that line that we've been drawing all along to help remember this pattern. So the diagnostics for the perfect, we have heat to tail. He slaughtered himself. That's the perfect 3MS. Now, all of the diagnostics are in every form. We saw that in the summary that we looked at right off the bat. We see that all through the perfect. Okay, and there's our schwa. There's our line for our schwa, patak, dagesh. Okay, for imperfect 3MS. Now we have a preformative. So the yod is the 3MS preformative. The tav of the heat remains, and then we still have the schwa, patak, dagesh. He will slaughter himself. He will slaughter because this is an imperfect. It's an incomplete action translated as future. All the diagnostics are in every form. It's just instead of the hey for heat, the preformative takes that place. Okay, but the diagnostics same in every form, and there's that line between the schwa, patak, dagesh. Okay, so that was imperfect. We looked at perfect, imperfect. Now we're looking at the imperative, the infinitive construct, and the infinitive absolute. And all of the diagnostics are exactly the same. You have the heat, you have the schwa, patak, dagesh. And then when it comes to finally to the participle, again, the mem replaces the hey that was there. The mem replaces that, makes it a participle. It retains that period. And the schwa, patak, dagesh all stay there. The diagnostics are the same in every form, slaughtering himself. So pretty easy to see that. It's one of the most obvious stems because of the uniqueness of the prefix there. So I want to look at the workbook on page 176. Actually, there's a couple of things we need to point out here. I just want to look at them. The first one, so that's a Hitpael. So you get 3 free ones here for your workbook. We see it's a Hitpael. We see that we have a yod preformative. It's replaced the hey, so we know it's an imperfect. So we have a yod preformative. There's no subformative, so we know it's a 3MS. And then The root is gadol. And the next one, we have the mem on the front. Yes, this is a participle. It's a Hitpael, and we have the mem with the hirik. We've got the tav from heat is still there. It's got the shva. We got the patak under the R1. We got the dagesh in R2. That's a Hitpael participle. It's a masculine singular participle from kavod or kavod. Now this is a verb, so kavod. And then the third one, again, we have a yod preformative. We also see a shirik subformative, so it's going to be third masculine plural. It is a Hitpael. We've got the preformative, and then the tav, and then the lamed kaf dalet. That's our root. So just it's easy to see. Now, while I'm on this page, I should note that I have a note here. I didn't go back and check it, but I have the answer key has a different word there. It has niflaot is what it has, and that's not right. So that's a nifal participle, a feminine plural participle. But this one has ivat tem. So this is not a heat pael because we don't see that tav in there. It's going to be a heat field. Perfect. So there's another free one for you. Okay, let's leave that open because I'm going to refer to the workbook again. But let's move on. Okay, because we want to talk about metathesis. Metathesis. Maybe this should have come a little bit sooner. I know what you're thinking. It can't be this easy, and you're right. So what we've seen so far is really, really easy. Let's look at some English examples. Pronounce this word. You do not say Wednesday. Nobody says Wednesday. Or if they do, you can tell that English is not their first language. We just kind of drop that Wednesday. We don't even, we drop out a couple of letters there, Wednesday. Let's try this one. I remember Tweety Pie running to Granny, asking for help because a piece of pescetti got me. The cat Sylvester had used the spaghetti as a lasso to catch Tweety Pie. There's a piece of pescetti's got me. Yeah, pescetti is really spaghetti, but that would be an example of like a metathesis where words have changed in the sound order. The letters have moved. I'll go back to that. So the S moved. And then nuclear, that's another thing that gets said. Should be nuclear. So anyway, we do this in English. So the hard part is the verbal roots that begin with sibilants and dentals can cause this problem, two different problems. Sibilants, what does that mean? It means something that makes an S sound. So that would include the samic, it would include the sade, because that's a TS sound. It would include the seen and the sheen. So those are the sibilants. And when you have that, it's going to change the way it works. So we have satar. Satar means he hid. We're going to make it a Hitpael. So we're going to add the heat to the front of it. And we're going to end up with his tater. His tater. What happened? The samic moved over. Well, either that or the tav moved over. However you want to look at that. They switch places. That's what metathesis is. It's a switching of place of letters like pescetti and spaghetti. So I said this means he hid. He hid the heat pile. He hid himself. He hid himself.
We're calling that a sibilant. It's sibilant.
Sibilant.
You did it.
I did it. Yeah, I did it. Sibilant. Good job. You get a gold star.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Also, okay, so sakar, that means he he hired. He hired. We want to turn it into a Hitpael, which is going to make it he hired himself out to somebody. He made himself to be a hired worker or something like that. So we're going to take this. We have still have a sibilant there, the scene, sakar. And so we're going to make that into a Hitpael, and we still have the he. This is we did up here. But again, either the scene moved over, or you could say that the tav moved over. One way or the other, it's they switch places. So when you have the sibilants, they change place. So as a Hitpael, this means he hired himself out as a worker. He made himself to be a hired worker. And then Tzaddik, to be he is just. We're going to make it into a Hitpael, and it becomes Hitz Tzaddik. Now there's two things at work here. We still have the metathesis in that the first root letter moved over, but then notice that the tav has become a tet. That happens like 3 times or something. Well, that's the next one. Oh, well, so anyway, so this would be he is just, and this he justified himself. Okay. But all the diagnostics are still there. We still see, notice the tseres, notice the pataks, notice the he, and then the thing is this moved over. We still have the heat, but it moved over. Let's just say this, just to make it common, the first letter, the sibilant, moved over. But all the diagnostics are still there. So it's tricky, but it's not that difficult. So we see that the tav became a tet. Notice that when the first letter is a stade, there's only 3 times. The tav of the Hitpael prefix will change to a tet. So, and there's the translations. He hid himself, he hired himself out, he justified himself. So let's go back to the workbook, page 177. Want to look at number 24. 22 and 24. Notice the he, and then we have the sheen on number 22. It moved over. That's the first root letter. So the root, this is shamar. So you have the sheen, mem, resh, but the tav comes after the sheen. That's the metathesis. Still a Hitpael. There's another free one for you. This is a Hitpael perfect. It's a first common plural to the new ending. And you see under the sheen, we still have the dagesh. We still have the patak under the second letter, which is where it traded places. And then even though the letters traded places, you still have that pattern of the shva, patak, and then the dagesh in the root two. And then number 24, we have it's Hitpael. Here's another free one for you. It's a participle. We have that mem prefix. We see it's got the heric me, but then the samic. The samic is actually the R1. It moved over. It separated the heat or the meat in this particular instance. The samic moved over. The root is the samic pei resh root. So that's a Hitpael participle. And with the tav at the end, it's going to be a feminine singular. I don't know if the answer key has for number 25. Notice the hey at the end of note 25. That would mean that this is a cohortative form. It looks like an imperfect, and it is an imperfect. It doesn't just look like it is, except we have that hey at the end, which would make it a cohortative. All right, I think I'm done with the workbook. All right, so we talked about the syllabates. Now we get to do the dentals, the nendals. I can't do it again. Anyway, the dentals. That's a sound that's made by the tongue touching right behind the teeth. So it'd be a dalet. If you say dalet, you can feel your tongue go up right behind the front teeth, dalet. Zayin is not as clear as far as where you place your tongue, zayin, but it's included. And then tet, of course, you put your tongue up there again for tet and tav. And so those are called dentals because your tongue goes up to the teeth, dentals. And so when you have dentals, you have assimilation. And we've seen assimilation before, karat. He cut, but if we want to go with a first person, I cut, or maybe I cut off. So we have karat. We're going to add the T suffomative. We don't put tav tav. We end up with karati. We've got the dagesh in the tav because it's doubled. So karati, I cut. So with the dentals, we have davar, which is a word, but if you make it intensive, whether it's PL or pual or Hitpael, it's going to be speaking. And we want to make it a Hitpael, so we're going to add the heat to the front. We're going to end up with he the bear. You still have the he. The tav disappeared because this is a dental. It's got the dalet here. We have the dagesh. It had a dagesh anyway. If it didn't have it, then it would gain it, but it already had it. And then we still have the dagesh in the R2. We still have the patak and dagesh there, the bear. And if we say tameh, so this is probably speaking to each other. It would probably be the reciprocal use of it, that first one. So the second one, the tameh, that's to be unclean, or to make yourself unclean, or to be declared unclean by making it a heat pa'el. We have heat tameh. We still have the tseri, we still have the patak, we still have the dagesh in the R2. But the tav of the heat is now in this dagesh in the tet, which is actually the first. So they combined. All right, let's go over the vocabulary. That is also on the same page as the summary, 369. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, the next page goes on to the Hitpael. Now, I believe that only is the only word that the word for worship, I think, is the only word that uses that stem. It's good that they mention it because that is a word that is used often. It means to bow yourself, really what it means. But that's why, even though it's not used all that often, that word does show up often. Anyway, going back to vocabulary, we have palal, to pray, and it almost always is in the Hitpael. It's almost always going to be Hitpael when you see that word. Taka means to thrust, like thrusting a sword or something, or it also can be blowing on a trumpet. Or is light. Lashon is tongue. Mikadesh or Mikadash. Notice you see kadosh there. Kadosh, that means holy. You put a mem in front of it, it becomes the place of holiness, which is the sanctuary. Mikdash. I said it wrong. Mikdash. Mikdash is sanctuary. Oaf is something that flies, or something that has wings, whether it flies or not. Like an ostrich might be an oaf that has wings. Bats are not birds, but they still have wings and fly. So you have oaf. One time we had a bird hanging upside down on one of the feeders or something, and I referred to it as a clumsy oaf. It was a was a pun on a Hebrew word there. So if that helps you remember oath. Aze is to do with a goat. And that's a feminine word, by the way. And sometimes you see it, and it really is referring to like you have to sacrifice a billy goat of the female goats. So you see the ezine from the female goats. Pri is fruit. Kir is a wall. Rechev is related to riding, and so it's a chariot. You also see chariots as Merkava. That comes up, Merkava. But it still has that same, I guess it would have that mem on the front, maybe the place of writing, but it's still has the resh, kaf, bait root in it. Shofar, you probably already know what that is. It's the ram's horn. And then toeva. Toeva is an abomination. Any questions? Okay, I already mentioned that Hitpael is covered later after the vocabulary. And then in the something you should know that begins on page 371, this is another one of those that this guy is reaching. He is trying to make the text say something that it doesn't actually say. He offers a suggestion in the first paragraph, and I have never heard this suggestion before. I've never heard anybody say this. He starts off with a question, but even before that, did God actually command Hosea to marry a prostitute? Yes, he did. That's what he said. That's why this guy's reaching. He's trying to make it say something other than the fact that God commanded Hosea to marry a prostitute. This guy just needs to believe what the text says and to look at the context. So I do not endorse this one at all. All right, so for the next week, the vocabulary from chapter 34, exercise 34 in our workbooks, and go ahead and read chapter 35, which is going to be the weak verbs, the Hitpael weak verbs. Any questions?